dear friends. Actually, in fact, to thank two people before I read my paper. One is morning Father Felix Wilfred, who set the tone to understand the realities from the subaltern perspective, or to hermeneutize the social situation from the subaltern perspective. And also very special thanks to Father Noel Sher for bringing us to the whole textual reading of Ambedkar, both the Hindu text and the Buddhist text in Sanskrit and the Pali languages, where Father Noel Sher is very strong with his Sanskrit and the Pali background, also with the Indian philosophical background. So these people have made my work very easier. So from there I take on, I'm going to give more on the existential reading of the Dalit reality. Existential and very particularly the experience, the Dalit experience, how they understand the world, how they understand the society, how they understand the reality vis-a-vis the caste reality. That is where I would like to give some of my reflections on the Dalit hermeneutic reading. It is important to clarify before I start 2-3 terms like hermeneutics. I know you are all very well versed with that. Looking at it from a subaltern perspective, and also the Dalit identity and the Dalit consciousness. Hermeneutic tradition is basically a subjectivist strand in social thought, in that the rational is seen an attribute to the subject. It consciously foregrounds the subject in the social and historical situation, shortening the distance between the human subject and his or her fellow being, both ontologically and epistemologically. Thus, the subject becomes the central figure in generating knowledge and meaning to human reality. Etymologically, we know hermeneutics means the science of understanding and interpretation. Thus, what we have today is the hermeneutics is thus the art of understanding and the theory of interpretation. In contrast to the explanation developed in natural sciences, the hermeneutic tradition rejects the positivist idea that there can exist a single method of arriving at knowledge both for natural and social sciences. The social world is a universe of meanings which demands an approach specific to its object, and hermeneutics comes to its aid by interpreting what motivates others, understanding in terms of human interrelatedness. So this is where I understand hermeneutics. For Heidegger, hermeneutics is a mode of a Dasein, being in the world. It is the very way of a being of Dasein itself. It is the way in and through which humans are constituted. Hermeneutics is a constitutive of human existence. It is the way in which the human being is becoming into existence. And from this, I move on to Dalit identity. Linguistically, the term Dalit has its roots both in Indian and Hebrew languages. The term Dalit in Sanskrit is both a noun and an adjective. As a noun, Dalit may be used for all three genders, masculine, feminine, and neuter. Etymologically, the term is derived from the Sanskrit root word dal, which means to crack, to open, to split, and so on. When used as a noun or adjective, it means burst, split, broken, or torn asunder, and so on. So Dalit is a self-designation for a group of people traditionally regarded as untouchables. The word Dalit in the recent past has gained so much attention that its meaning has gained international recognition. It is also used in the modern times in literature, in the realms of politics, economics, culture, sociology, anthropology, religious studies, and theology. Only in the last decade the term Dalit is employed in philosophical literature. The term Dalit bears an existential significance and a political overtone. The term itself bears witness to Dalit uprising and Dalit mobility as a politically motivated group determined to change their position in the social hierarchy as the lowest people. It at once creates an existential anger in and the capacity to organize and agitate for their rights. The term is a self-assertive and confrontational in the sense it creates in the people a sense of self-worth and the spirit to fight when the self-worth is stripped of them in the social, political, and cultural context. So thus, it creates in them a positive image and prepares them to assert a consciousness which is foregrounded in Dalit emancipation and for Dalit emancipation. Now, construction of the Dalit consciousness. Now, I also would like to look at the whole idea of consciousness from different philosophical backgrounds, starting with the Descartes and Karl Marx. Then from there, we move on to the Dalit consciousness. I'll just give a little background of Karl Marx, how he looks at the consciousness. For him, it is a production of social relations in the economic, social, political realms, which determines the construction of consciousness and not vice versa. In the social production of their existence, people inevitably enter into definite relations, which are independent of their will, namely relations of production appropriate to a given stage in the development of their material forces of production. The totality of these relations of production constitutes the economic structure of a society and real foundation on which arises a legal and political superstructure and to which correspond definite forms of social consciousness. The mode of production of a material life conditions the general process of social, political, and intellectual life. It is not the consciousness of the men that determines their existence, but their social existence that determines their consciousness, according to Marx. From the above readings, we can derive the understanding of the construction of consciousness from the viewpoint of the subordinated people, especially Dalits, as follows. Constructing consciousness is an ongoing process. It is basically an activity of a perception, reflection, evaluation. It is also the awareness of the perception and ability to act and react. Though consciousness is constructed from experience, it does not happen simultaneously, but for one step away from the actual experience. It is again not a phenomenon either static or stage by stage, but a process which is a continuous and realization in time, space, and event continuum. In the usual sense, I differ with the Marx in understanding consciousness. It is a social existence that determines the consciousness of the people. But with the subordinated groups, it is the people like the Dalits in India, the blacks are concerned. It is a consciousness of the people of their subordinated condition that determines their existence. It is a kind of intense and continuous sensibility of resistance against their subjugated status that conditions their everyday life. So this is what I mean, the subordinated or Dalit consciousness. And for me, from the experience and from the reality in India, I would like to look at even the whole idea of a consciousness of the subaltern people at three levels. That is the untouchable consciousness, the SC consciousness, and the Dalit consciousness. What I mean by untouchable consciousness is very much written upon the deterministic and fatalistic attitude. That is, what I am is my fate, what I am is the given and I have to accept it. And the best way of liberation is accepting myself and subduing myself to the dominant society. And for them, the caste person becomes his own liberator. So unless the caste person liberates me, I cannot liberate myself. So that is the idea. And the SC consciousness is more of a post-colonial consciousness that is being developed among some groups of the SC, where they have replaced the caste person by the state. For him, the state becomes a redeemer through reservation, through some of the policies. But what he does not understand, that the state is the extension of the caste. The people who represent the state are the people also who represent the caste. So they don't understand that we get nothing, though we have some policies, but it's not really liberating the people. For him, the state becomes his own liberator. Whereas on the other hand, the Dalit consciousness, this is a third type of consciousness. In this model, the Dalit feels that he or she is an esteemed self like any other. It is because of the caste mentality of the dominant self and the defective and anti-Dalit policies and programs that the Dalits remain poor and oppressed. So both the dominant caste ideology and the state policies become their enemies. They fight against both and rely on their personal and community strength and unity. Here they are their own liberators and rely on their community sources like their culture, their social capital, their art, their music. They take the social protest as a means to achieve their emancipation. From the foregoing discussion, one can infer that the construction of the consciousness of the subaltern people involves two important factors. Primarily, the consciousness of the subaltern people is not something innate, but is a constructed entity, a constituted entity, both socially, culturally, historically. There are two levels in and through which the consciousness of the subordinated people is operant. They are as a submissive consciousness and a subversive of the submissive enforced upon the dominant discourse. It is revealing to note that the Dalits, in spite of the historical and cultural facets of a submissive or domesticating consciousness, have asserted their position as a people endowed with and capable of restoring their self-esteem and specifically their Dalit identity. So from here, I move on to understanding hermeneutics in a Dalit experiential and Dalit existential context. The fundamental social reality of India is the existence and the practice of caste and the hierarchical social arrangement which segregates people as high and low. The caste system also produced untouchability. This is a problematic. This is a situatedness, the foreground against which we need to understand and interpret Dalit reality. The fusion of horizons directed towards a specific social structure. It is against this social situation that the Dalit liberation needs to be historically situated and socially engaged against this context of injustice as to respond against this world of inauthenticity towards an authentic mode of being in the world of liberative hermeneutics. So this is where I understand the whole understanding, the whole exercise of hermeneutics with regard to the Dalit existence and experience. So what is the experience of the Dalit? Dalit existence as excluded. That is the first premise I would like to take. Dalit experience and Dalit existence are co-equal as both are marked by exclusion and discrimination. It varies from place to place, gender-based, plural and urban bound. But the overarching experience is that they all experience social exclusion. I have undertaken some case studies where the people themselves speak. So it is not I am representing, but the people present themselves. So it is a narrative and it is a representative. To be a Dalit is a dirty thing. Now Jaya Subramanian, a social activist and educator from Madurai, Tamil Nadu, experienced more of social exclusion both in her neighborhood as a child and also in her institution where she attended schools and colleges. She would cringe at the revelation of her identity in a college as a C student, and as their peers would look at her as if there was a dirty thing thrown in their midst. Then there is another Dalit activist, Jakkayan, experienced the worst form of exclusion when he was forced to introduce himself as the son of a cobbler in the college. He locates his Dalit existence in the social ambience which denies his physical, psychical, socio-economic and even the moral space for him. The dominant world view ghettoizes his being in the widest spectrum of a caste war or caste ghetto. Encircled by all forms of oppression, Shaktivel, another social activist from Arundhati community, it's a cobbler community from Tamil Nadu, went through this exclusion through an economic impoverishment which prevented him from continuing his studies after school. He was thus forced to discontinue his studies, work for some time, save some money to carry out with his studies. Thus, Dalit lifehold is marked by social backwardness and economic backwardness which limit the horizon of one's being and denies one's becoming. And denial of the very basic things of a human life, Yesumaran, a Jesuit, a social activist, where he locates the whole Dalit being denied at three levels: denial of land, denial of education, and denial of housing, which are very, very basic. Unless this has been accorded or this has been ensured, the whole idea of exercising one's identity, one's being is not possible, he says. Then caste perversion as the root of all problems. Caste in India is taken as a symbol of power and domination. If thus caste is considered as an experience of power or expression of power, it reduces the outcast to total powerlessness. Mr. Selvaraj, in his very simple language, comprehends the idea how dominant caste people treat the Dalits. And in his words, we should keep these people, the Dalits, like this. We should talk to them in this manner only. Then only we will be able to get their respect. Then only others will look up to us. Then only they will have the feeling that we are everything for them. So this is a typical way of the caste mind projecting itself over the Dalit reality. This is the given, this is the normative principle, and this is the social ethos in which Dalits have to realize, evolve, and execute their selfhood. This implies Dalit identity. This is the way caste people look at the Dalits. Dalits is untouchability is the fundamental experience that every Dalit goes through. I knew my caste before I knew my name and its meaning. Our people are not known by their names, but by their subcaste. Our caste name becomes synonymous to our name. Our name is not so important for the dominant caste people, but calling us by our caste makes the dominant caste people feel superior. If at all there is anything real about us, is our identity as outcast. So this is also one of the experiences of another Dalit, when he was interviewed by the Amnesty International in Paris, and he remarked that caste is omnipresent and omnipotent in India. These are some of the experiences of the Dalits where they would like to give their own feelings. And from this background, sometimes it has been said that mud, wood, cow dung, rock are more valuable in India than a Dalit. Professor T.K. John, Professor of Theology at Vidyajyoti College, Delhi, traces the root of the caste problem in the Hindu social order and traces the locus of Dalit self thus. I think, I quote, I think in Indian society, mud, wood, cow dung, rock, all these are more appreciated than Dalits. Mud you want for brick, you touch it, no problem. Rock, also a Brahmin has touched and anybody can touch it, no problem. Sleep over it, use it for a building, and any of these materials is rated higher than Dalits in the Hindu consciousness. So this is the core value attached to Dalits by the Hindu social order, which goes with them wherever they go. Whichever religion they embrace, whatever they do and achieve. While caste has its order in the Hindu religion, it does not spare other religious people. The discriminative practice against which Dalits left Hinduism and embraced religions like Christianity were greatly disappointed, as it has become the core value of even Christianity in India. So Vanita, another CSI Christian girl, speaks about how she's been treated in a CSI church. I worked as a helper in RS Mangalam in a CSI church run orphanage. I didn't like the job. They did not give me a job for my qualification, but for my caste. Instead of giving me the warden job, which would fit into my qualification, they sent me to clean the children and wash their clothes. Since the bishop is from the Nodar community, sorry to mention the name, because this is just presenting the narratives of some of the Dalits, he would give a good job only to someone who is from his own community. But a person like me, who is more qualified, was given only such a menial job. So all these things explain how a Dalit is a position in Indian social, political and economic context. So from this background, I would like to look at the whole idea of the hermeneutics of Dalit exclusion. The philosophical analysis of the existential foreground of subjugated people's life experience calls for hermeneutical interpretation of what is it to be a subjugated people. As the innermost personal individual level, a culturally subjugated person imbibes a deep sense of aloneness in spite of being or living in a social crowd, for she or he is thrown into an outside within the alienating crowd of the oppressive totality. It is an experience of a psychological alienation caused to several multiple networks of forms of discrimination. It is not that one, a Dalit, feels lonely, rather more potentially the subjugated lives alone circumscribed by featuring practice of loneliness. He is forced to live in aloneness due to the social pressure and suspicion and cultural prejudices of their power mindsets. And also Dalit exclusion as a cultural reproduction. Caste mentality as endowed, philosophically construed and culturally imbibed comes to stay alive and determine the common Indian perceptions by its repetitive modes of reproduction. In analyzing the reason for the reproduction of casteism, Ambedkar distinctly clarifies that casteism is continuously reproduced by social practice of endogamy, that is, marrying within one's own caste. So casteism as a form of cultural Darwinism is reimposed by rituals and social customs and habitations explicit in Indian cultural and religious practices. The modern inventions of caste named or caste-based associations are but an offshoot of such caste naming to the individual. Then the metaphysics of exclusion. In the history of philosophy, one could situate the locus of metaphysical sense of exclusion in the dialectical tension between the polarized conceptual variables. In the metaphysics of injustice, there always existed a hegemonic practice of domination. As a result, separateness serves the antithesis to the becoming of justice. This is the theoretically schooled and internally justified as monism and dualism perspectives in philosophy. Casteism is a monistic in the sense the totalized determinant of the individual is a secular feature, that is caste, and it is also dualistic in the sense that every individual is in distant separation from the other because of caste segmentation. These dominant paradigms rigorously promote logically sound institutionalization of a monopoly. Brahman and non-Brahman are the dichotomy or the exclusives are like the Brahmin and the Dalits. We have got a number of that kind of things. You have got between the so-called primary and secondary realities such as form and matter, God and cosmos, Purusha and Prakriti, the holy and the unholy, the ideal and the real, the spirit and the body, the rational and the empirical, and so on. And all these things kind of a binary oppositions where one is premised upon the other, the primary and the secondary. So the dominant caste and the subordinate caste, the priestly and the laity, untouchable and the touchable. So there have always existed a theoretical institutionalization of the subjugation of the secondary by the primary reality. In social expression is the practice of a value dualistic caste order or disorder, where the practice of discrimination is maintained by subordinating the secondary to the so deemed primary ones. The conceptual distinction of a conceiving reality in terms of polarities is the basic rationale for the unquestioned practices, homogeneous social groupings in the name of caste or religion or race. Then the epistemological exclusion. The epistemological exclusion, in a sense, is a denial of truth affirmation. It is a sense of a denial of the possibilities of understanding the world from his or her own specificity of a life experience, because the subjugated people are at loss, rather surrounded by dominant paradigms of truth claims, where social function is to maintain the supremacy of the dominant worldviews or the philosophical positions. It is but a sort of a mystification of consciousness by myths of truths. What is called a truth is what I say is a truth. This is what Foucault describes, Michel Foucault describes as a knowledge, as a power, and such a political power determines the scope of what is a knowledge in a given context. We can call this the epistemic throne awareness. Consequently, epistemological throne awareness is the prism through which subjugated people are bound to perceive and evaluate reality. At the same time, he or she would be able to transcend such prism through the mediation of struggle to expose the falsehood instilled in the epistemology of the dominant discourse. Then I'm also, I would like to just skip how the whole idea of a moral sense of exclusion also takes place with regard to Dalit reality. So from here, I would like to move on to the reconstruction of Dalit hermeneutics as a liberating consciousness. So the ontological condition of being excluded amidst cultural reproductive repression is not and cannot be an end in itself. What has been textually and contextually made true can also be culturally reconstructed to be proved false and illegitimate. What is erroneously constructed can be rightfully deconstructed. That is what is meant by evolving a hermeneutic of a social philosophy of liberation with a special reference to Dalit culture, a human project in a world of a human society. It is situated both in the culture of a pain experience, a strong sense of social exclusion due to caste perceptions in the caste worldview of Indian society, and also in the protest experience towards affirmation of the Dalit identity through liberating possibilities. So it is against this background, I would like to give certain programs to understand the whole idea. A subordinated consciousness rejects metaphysics of identity. The experience of the Dalits clearly indicates that there have been a borrowed identity which has been imposed upon them as a metaphysically constructed category. They are imposed upon them as irreversible and incontrovertible to their worldview. Further, the subordinated communities were made to feel and consider them as real. The dominant discourse was successful in this venture by destroying most of their historical and cultural traces. On the contrary, their life situations reveal that there is nothing metaphysical about their identity, their place in the society, as the dominant world does not have any such constructs to itself. Hence, it becomes evident that such categories were gradually constructed by human agents in order to subjugate one section for the benefit of the other section. So this is how the subordinate communities remain in servitude while the dominant discourse continues this type of social construction. Then, subordinated consciousness also is historically constructed. Subordinated consciousness is constructed in and through history, especially when the subordinated people become aware of their history, which contains in itself a glorious past during which the sons and daughters of the soil enjoyed equal freedom and power with other groups and communities. This has been the counted historical evidence of Dalit history. Their history unfolds itself in and through techniques by which other subordinated communities have affirmed their identity and empowered themselves. So unfolding history also breaks the myths that subordinated communities have been subordinated eternally, but were once free people enjoy equal rights and privileges of the natural world. Also, subordinated consciousness is constructed through domination versus subordination discourse. The basic experience and worldview of Dalit is a domination-subordination world as the given. It becomes their basic social reality. They don't see a world without this dichotomy of caste versus outcast. This domination, the subordination dichotomy depersonalizes the subordinated, strips their self of its power and authority to be what he or she wants to be, disrupts its being and belonging and its capacity to become. On the other hand, it imposes upon the self the dominant culture to be subservient to the dominant self, dominant discourse. As a result, the subordinated self is impoverished, alienated from its life world, culture, and ideological purview. In other words, it lives a borrowed life, possesses a borrowed self, and becomes a non-being or negation of being. Subordinated consciousness is constructed through resistance as mediation for affirmation. Resistance is a mode by which the subordinated self exhibits itself. This is the appropriate way of expressing in a dominant subordinated social web. When subordination is something which is construed against the will and the consensus of the subordinated self, it logically and ethically needs to construct itself in the same direction as the dominant self imposes upon the subordinated self. There is no other appropriate way of expressing and realizing its equality and dignity than resistance. A subordinated self can affirm and actualize its being only in and through resistance. By resisting all that is imposed upon the subordinated self, it expresses a sense of selfhood, re-establishes the lost identity, and recaptures its position in the social and cultural world. Also, subordinated consciousness exposes caste as a myth by which the dominant discourse survives. The dominant people always construct myths to sustain their domination, and only by continuously engaging in creating such myths, the dominant discourse survives. They construct their identity through myths like caste. This myth is made real, and to sustain this myth, they create an ideology through religion, cultural symbols, social and cultural discourse like Brahmanism, which divides people according to caste as superior and inferior. then social movement plays a very vital role in constructing subordinated collective consciousness. Social movements among the subordinated people play a very crucial and vital role in constructing subordinated consciousness. Social movements become very significant in terms of creating collective consciousness. It is collective, visible, and tangible. While other forms of creative subordinated consciousness, literature, education, economic progress are very slow in their reach and rather individualistic in nature, social movement reaches out to the community faster and collectively. It also empowers the people not as individuals but as a community. Social movements boost up their psyche as they physically bring the victims together and give them the we feeling by affirming their power in coming together and fighting together for the rights and their share in the society. So this is what I wanted to share. Finally, to conclude, Dalit hermeneutics is thus primarily derived from Dalit reality, both in its existential realm and also in their day-to-day experience of oppression, discrimination, and also protest to re-establish their historically lost freedom and selfhood. Hermeneutics, though a Western tool to understand and interpret realities in their social, economic, political, and cultural historical context, is very much in the helm of Indian social and political philosophical fields. It is even significantly employed. Such a tool not only to investigate Indian philosophical systems and values, but also to expose the methodological paucity of Indian intellectual exercise and to continue to reinvent newer tools to understand and expand knowledge generation of the subaltern realities in Indian soil, which is a deeply casteist, cultural fundamentalist, and political anarchist. It is in such a context, hermeneutical tool becomes expedient and even ethical to unravel Indian realities. Thank you very much.